So you are in charge of looking forward to the future and planning on behalf of Cape Town.
So you said looking forward to the future.
Or looking forward into the future, you are
trying
to anticipate what's going to happen.
I am looking forward to the future.
Good. Well, it's good to be optimistic. I read in some of the data that you provided that Cape Town could have 7.5 million people by 2050, up from, is it 4.7 at the moment. And my immediate question was, where's the water going to come from?
Yeah, so we are, Cape Town is growing currently at about 100,000 people a year, considering in-migration and then the net birth rate. So we project, and we do this every single year to get a sense of where that will go, because of course it could change. There could be a shock event elsewhere in South Africa that, for example, increases the rate of in-migration. So water, yes, it's important. We're a city that attracted international headlines only sort of 6-7 years ago, the day zero drought, and the city came fairly close at that stage to a real major crisis. So I think we learned from that experience incredibly. It took us to the brink, and our commitment is, droughts are common. Droughts will happen. That is part of this region. What's important is that if we, along with demographic change and along with the changing nature of climate, and we take that seriously, our runoff is decreasing, about 2% a year or so into our dams. We have to build the type of system that is able to cater both for the increase in population as well as the shock events, which are no doubt in our future. So that plan is in implementation at the moment. It should be fully executed by about 2031, and that's 300 million litres of additional water a day from groundwater abstraction, from direct water reuse, which should break ground in about 2 years' time. That's 70 to 100 million litres of additional water from treating sewage straight into the drinking water at a ratio of about 1:10, and then, of course, a bit of desal. So to build some insurance into it as well. By 2040, we aim to have 75% of our water from dams, 25% from alternative sources.
Mm-hmm. And when you're looking forward over the next 25 or so years, what do you see as some of the big pressures? There's resilience in your job title, as I understand it. So kind of what are you assuming you need to be resilient against?
So we have a range of prioritized shocks and stresses. I think at a thematic level, before you sort of get to the shock components of it, I think as I've already said, quite a lot about climate change and how that will impact the city. Think also about the technological change, and that is very, very important, and really good use cases coming out of our government now around AI, and we're trying to stay ahead of that as much as possible. Like any organization, we also think about the changing nature of the world, multipolarity of the world, and what that means. We obviously, as an organization, are trying to build infrastructure, not only for dignity and the residents of Cape Town, but also to make this place an attractive place to invest. And we're here at the southern tip of Africa. We're quite far away from market. So staying ahead of that. So we take a great interest in things that are not in our direct control as well, things like trade policy. And we're, of course, interested in what this new government of national unity might do for new opportunities. But in terms of the details, shocks and stresses, we've had to confront load shedding as an organization, and obviously the people of Cape Town more widely. From a continuity point of view, we have to provide services, which means load shedding affects us and our ability. And we still project some degree of load shedding, at least for the next 6 or 7 years. It's better that we prepare for that, possibly not at the levels that we thought it would. But at the same time, we also have to respond in the energy space as well, to diversify. And our mayor has made some strong commitments about at least alleviating a certain number of levels of load shedding in order to ensure general continuity and reliability of supply to the people of Cape Town as a whole.
And how much do you have to, how much can you plan for sorry, let me start again. The increases in population that you're assuming, do you have a sense of kind of the balance of that, like within the city? I mean, anyone that's arrived here for this conference will probably have flown into the airport, and then you see the Cape Flats before you get to the main city itself. Are you assuming that there's going to be disproportionate growth in the suburbs or in the township areas around?
So I think we're certainly planning for a growth in informality in the city. There are about 500,000 or so abodes in informality, and we would expect that to grow. And our response as an organization to improving sources and improving infrastructure related to informality is critically important. Informality is part of our future, but equally as well, working obviously with the private sector and through the enabling environment that we provide through regulations, and hopefully making it easier, not harder, also provide the regulatory environment for other sources of housing, as well at various levels of affordability to cater for, people also getting out of informality into other forms of housing.
And what are you doing? Pardon me. What are you doing about kind of infrastructure resilience in places like the Cape Flats, which, if you haven't been to, are kind of, like the name would suggest, it's on a flat plain, and there has been quite a lot of really bad flooding in places like Hanover Park, Mitchell's Plain over the past.
Yeah. So particularly in stormwater and then the general reticulation systems for both water and sewage, those are areas of absolutely high focus. You're quite right. There are some parts of the city, particularly in informal areas, where there is little to no stormwater. And so we've got projects in the system which aim to obviously roll that out and roll out more. Critically as well, what's important is there is a large amount of fairly organic densification, which is happening in parts of the city that does not necessarily fall into the traditional development approval processes of the city. It's a difficult thing to say, but that is a good thing for the city, because more and more people in Cape Town are adding additional dwellings to their earths, whether formal or not, trying to go up. All of that places immense pressure on the existing infrastructure. So I lead a team that works obviously on infrastructure planning, going well into the sort of 10 to 20 year periods from now. A large amount of that is pipe replacement, and then the installation of new resilient infrastructure, as you say, like stormwater. So that entire pipeline of infrastructure now for the next 10 years across energy, water, waste, human settlements, and mobility is at about 123 billion rand. And we are on an annual basis updating that. We're trying to get much better at increasing the number of projects in the outer years. And it's what's important in the philosophy, which I drive with the teams that I get to lead, is it's important that we plan for the need and not just what we think is available in terms of funding. Funding comes second, but having ready executable projects that are good to go is critical for good portfolio management in the infrastructure space in Cape Town.
And there's been a few new businesses setting up in Cape Town, kind of Amazon being one of them, and a few offices moving down from Johannesburg. There's been quite kind of impressive commercial property growth in the center of the city. I mean, how much are those businesses kind of asking you about these sustainability issues? I mean, when they decide where they're going to build their headquarters or their kind of regional offices, are they just asking kind of, so how much does the land cost and kind of how high can I build? Or how many conversations are they having with you about things like water and the effects of climate change in future?
They do have those conversations, but they're principally around continuity, more so than sustainability at this point.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Cape Town, obviously, as I said, started, it had a headline attracting drought crisis. And of course, the whole of South Africa in the last 18 months to 2 years, not so much, I guess, the last 6 months, has had an energy supply crisis. So investors in the city are principally looking at whether things that I guess they might take for granted are things that we can reliably supply. And those are, it shouldn't have to be this way for South African cities, but it's important for us to be able to assure that there is a reliable supply of water and that it is increasingly becoming diversified. So that is important. And I think from my sense of the investors that I've spoken to, there's almost a sense of you've been through this already, you know what it's like, we'll trust you to get it right. And the energy supply as well, driven by Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis, as I said earlier, there's this a number of different strategies as well, which are there in order to alleviate what will be sort of 2 to 4 levels of load shedding. I suspect we're dialing back on that somewhat, but because there's a bit more surety in supply at this point in time. So those are critical. But investors are very interested also in co-location of being around other interesting businesses. So because of, for example, a significantly large number of all renewable energy businesses in South Africa are located in Cape Town, that becomes an added attraction. And it's similar actually in the digital space as well. Co-location is important. And it is important for us as Cape Town, because as I said earlier, we are far away from market. We're far away from Gauteng with a considerably larger thing. So services and green tech and the like are some of our comparative advantages. And we certainly want to, through continuity, be able to collectively, and it's business and government. Business does a much better job, I think, of selling Cape Town because they can talk about the practical success. It's about doing that together. Yeah.
I'm just looking here to see if there are any questions. I wish I would have that in my normal journalistic life. You run out of questions and they're beamed in from afar. No, so let me ask you about the port?
I don't know too much about the port. I've got views on the port, of course.
You know there's a port though, right?
Yeah, the port is, according to the rankings, the most inefficient port that is ranked in the world. I mean, that's critical to our economy. We don't have our hands on that as a municipal government. So from an advocacy point of view, we're pushing very, very hard for that. We've been talking to the presidency about whether some of the concessions that potentially that are available in Durban and in the Eastern Cape might be allowed over here. But it's a real problem. And what's interesting for us as a local government is, particularly a very ambitious local government, is that if we don't directly control something, we certainly don't just sit back. We at least advocate for change. And, that would be the case in changing energy regulations as well, which, we led the charge on many of these things going back for a few years. And thankfully, our rail system appears to be bouncing back very nicely because that has also been an area of advocacy as well. The mayor has been very keen to explore possible other models of delivery of a rail service. But as of about sort of 4 or 5 weeks ago, post a catastrophic impact of COVID on our rail service, as far as I'm aware, every rail station in Cape Town is now fully functional. What we now have to do is get the passenger numbers up. And so a lot of work has to go into that.
And last question, let me borrow one from the previous session, which is, how do you strike the balance right between Cape Town being kind of something of a plaything for affluent tourists, wanting to increase the number of visitors you're getting here? Even things like this digital nomad visa will probably bring in kind of more people, with the needs of the kind of existing population, especially the poorer parts of the population. I mean, if you're talking about resilience, there's a kind of infrastructure resilience, but there's also a kind of social resilience as well. Like, how do you make sure that in attracting those from outside of Cape Town, you don't exclude those who are already here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I can look at it from a number of different ways. So, I think people often don't necessarily consider that us as an organization, a metropolitan government, for us, financial sustainability is vitally important. Because it is what allows us to be attractive for grant giving. It allows us to borrow at lower rates from DFIs, across the world. So our financial sustainability is important. And, we generate most of our budget is our own revenue, certainly in the operational side. And that's important. And so raising revenues from property taxes is important. And yes, we have a lot of high-end properties in Cape Town, and the city government obviously makes a lot of money about that. But that is, on the other side, we also have the most generous and ambitious social package for poor Cape Townians, indigent Cape Townians, through relief on energy or water or rates on tariffs. So there is a balance here that is important. And you said it yourself, John. I mean, we have a lot of people are going to be moving into Cape Town increasingly. We have to be able to be financially sustainable in order to provide that social relief package. So in between that is market failure. There's no doubt in my mind around particularly housing. And so I've already spoken about how there is organic growth and densification happening. We have to support that. Many of those Cape Townians who are building in places that previously wouldn't have been built on are also future customers of the city of Cape Town, and that is important. And then, unlocking affordable housing, which we're doing far more aggressively than we've ever before, for example, through land release for affordable housing. And we're even more ambitious. We want national government to release some of their land as well, is important, so that we have a range of different, as I said, typologies of housing. So getting those balances is right. We're lucky to have that mountain. But it's also important for us to set ourselves up as different, and to celebrate and to show, to maintain good governance and to celebrate it, and to make sure that we have those points around sustainability and resilience that are attractive. But one last thing, because I see we're running out of time, it's important for us as well that the whole of South Africa succeeds. That is we're not trying to beat anyone else. Our economy in Cape Town is heavily reliant on many actions in the economy of Gauteng, for example, because people here service that economy incredibly. We must obviously chase our service industries and hospitality, and you've referenced that as well. But the best way we can grow is through our own success, but also South Africa growing as well. And, I'm looking forward to, and I think it's the case, that we might start to get some meaningful growth in South Africa in the next year or so. Off a low base, admittedly, but that'll be good for the whole of South Africa and Cape Town.
Well, I hope so too, not least because I've just written a piece about the world in 2025. I'm relatively optimistic about South Africa. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Cape Town, for hosting this summit as well.
It's a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you.